Hello, and welcome to Spiritual Spark Sunday. All of the opinions expressed on this sermon are those of the presenter and do not necessarily express the views of Pagan Pathways Temple or its affiliates. Today on Spiritual Spark Sunday, we will be speaking about trauma and how it's a gift. This service will take place every third Sunday of the month. We are excited to share these pearls of wisdom with you. So if you get something from this, please share. Thanks, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Good morning, everyone. Afternoon. Today, I have the great pleasure of starting off our brand new Spiritual Spark Sunday. Spiritual Spark Sunday is a little bit strange because it's part sermon, but it's also an opportunity for many different paths and many different faiths to share some teachings and some guidance. And we really hope that you get something out of it. So this month I'm the speaker, and then next month I believe Diana will be speaking, and then or Cynthia. And if you're interested in taking part in Spiritual Spark Sunday, please go ahead and send us an email at paganpathwaystemple@gmail.com, and we'll answer and throw you into the rotation, because we're nothing unless we're all of us. All of us need to have a place. So today, my sermon, I guess if you call it that, is going to be about trauma and how it's a gift. And a lot of people are probably going to see that as a controversial thing, but it's really not. Trauma is a gift. Yeah, it's not a great gift. I certainly wouldn't want it for Christmas, but it does teach you things that ordinary life doesn't teach you. It does teach you about resiliency. It teaches you about things that might be going on in your mind that you don't realize or understand are going on in the background all the time. It teaches you about how maybe you need to be able to ask for help from time to time. And so let's just go ahead and I'll just start right into it. And we're just gonna kind of go from there. I've got a kind of loose outline, and we'll just kind of go and see where we get. So I wanted to start off with a quote. The quote is, "Our wounds are often the openings into the best and most beautiful parts of ourselves." And that's by David Richo. So the reason that I chose this as the theme today was that we've entered into the season of shadow work. And it's gonna be a doozy. 2020 has almost been a year of shadow work if you really get down to it. Let's think about that. You know, we in late February, early March started getting into this period where we all had to stay home for like a couple months, 2-3 months, where our normal patterns were disrupted, where we lost jobs, where we lost livelihood, where we lost income, where we lost the ability to really see each other and visit with one another. We lost a lot of things during that period of time, and it felt like a grand upheaval. You know, even from our media to our real life living. You know, you could see even on television things that had never happened before. You know, you're in a teleprompter's house, you're in the journalist's house, and they're talking to you about whatever, and they're in their house, and like their pets are around and things like that. And like, if it were any other circumstance, that would be really cool, but it's not. So all of 2020 has kind of been like this shadow period where we're all kind of trying to sort out what the new normal is, with the astrological omens being what they've been all year, and things just kind of being chaos and crazy. It's been a year of shadow work, and it's been a year of tremendous growth. Now, is growth pleasant? No! Growth sucks! There are things about growth that are so incredibly sucky. But on the other side of it, you can look back and go, hey, we've been through all that. We know what that looks like now. We've been through it. So we know it's going to be a doozy, especially getting into that dark period of the year. The things that we faced and the challenges that we've overcome just are enough alone to process. And I've been through complete life changes a few times now. I've been through 2 messy divorces, including abuse, losing custody of my sons, and being barred from seeing them by their custodians with absolutely no legal recourse. To somebody who is as involved in their kid's life as I was. I wasn't perfect mom by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't pretend I was. I had temper tantrums. I had screaming matches with my kids. I wasn't perfect, but I was there and I did okay. But, I don't have any legal recourse anymore. And I have to figure out what I'm supposed to do to move on from that point. And a lot of that has been an unraveling. And really, shadow work at its base step is an unraveling. And yeah, that sounds really terrifying because you're like, I'm made of person and I shouldn't unravel. But you can. Because only through unraveling, that's the only way that you can fix the problems that exist in the fabric itself. So it's important. Trauma teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us you can't always control the weather, and God knows I know it because I'm in a trailer right now and it's kind of frightening with how much rain that's coming down right now. You can't always control the weather, but you can always control what you wear. If you wear a smile, you're going to feel a little better about yourself. If you wear a raincoat, it's going to protect you from the rain a little bit. So you can't always change the weather, but you can almost always change your clothes. And I'm not talking about the witches that actually are weather witches here, right? This is a metaphor. You can't always change the weather, but you can always change your clothes. And you can always change the way that you look at things. You can always reframe. It's hard sometimes because, especially if you've got about a depression going on, or you've got some sort of psychological trauma going on that's active in your brain, it's very hard to talk to your brain when it's like, you suck, and you're sitting there talking to it, being like, I don't suck, and it's like, but you suck though. You don't need to listen to that. You can change it. It takes time and it takes effort, but you can do it. We all can do it. We can reframe our experiences. And it won't make us all better, but it'll make us able to kind of tolerate and be able to see what it is that's going on around us. So don't be afraid to tell Mr. Bumpet Man here just to go away. Because we need to be able to reframe and put on the clothes that are appropriate for the weather. Trauma also teaches us about humility and gratitude. They're important, but really acceptance reigns supreme. So what do I mean by that? Well, humility is when you're humble. You don't lead with your ego. You lead with service, right? And gratitude is being grateful for the things that you have received. And that's also very important. And that's a really important part of a daily practice. And I'd recommend, if you don't already do this, make sure that you're accepting and being gracious every single day for the things that you've been given. Make sure you let the goddesses know. Make sure you let the gods know that you're grateful for the sun. You're grateful for the weather, even if it really sucks right now. You're grateful for everything you have and all the blessings that you've been given, even if something terrible is going on that might take those things away from you. It's important to be gracious and to be happy about it. But when it comes right down to it, especially when you're in a traumatic situation or you've just come through the other side of trauma, acceptance reigns supreme. And what I mean by that is sometimes, some days, you're going to be able to conquer the entire world. You're going to be able to wash the clothes that are in the wash. You're going to be able to wash the dishes. You're going to be able to take care of all the things that you need to do for your actual mundane job if you have one. You're going to be able to conquer things, kick butt, and take names. Some days you'll be able to do that. Some days getting half a toe out of bed is the best you can manage. And you need to accept that. That some days are gonna really suck. Really suck. But it's okay. Because the next day may not. And you gotta give it a chance. You gotta give it a chance. Trauma also teaches us it is necessary to ask for help when you need it. Really. If you need help, don't try to flail with your arms in the air. Delegate. Find someone who can help you. If you are finding that you're in an extremely compromising mental situation, get help. And, I know all of us don't have health insurance. I get that. It's a hard time right now. People don't have what they need. But you can always find a friend to help you and talk you through it. You can always find YouTube videos about psychological concepts and about things that you might be going through, some strategies, some techniques on how to address it. You can always find some sort of small help. Even if it isn't your traditional, go to the counselor and talk for a 50-minute hour and let everything go. There's always some way that you can make things a little bit better for yourself. And sometimes that looks like writing in a journal. Sometimes we may not have the people around us that we would rather have. And we need to write in our journal. And we need to just process what's going on. And identify places where our thinking might not be what it should be. Trauma also teaches us that sometimes, some days, you're a superhero. And some days you manage to get food in your belly and you manage to take a shower. And that's good enough. And really, that's good enough. Some days are hard. Sometimes it's really hard to motivate yourself to clean the entire closet, and sometimes you just need to. I see one sock out of place, I'm grabbing that sock and I'm putting it in the wash. Sometimes that's all you have in you. And that's a micro movement. And that's a small accomplishment. And you got to feed your brain with small accomplishments sometimes, because the larger ones are sometimes really hard to come by. Really hard to come by. Trauma also teaches us that grief is a constant companion and shall always come when called. But if you do not call her, she'll come and check in anyway. Let me break that down. Let me talk about that a little. You have to make space sometimes to allow yourself to process your grief. Because if you don't make space to process that grief, it's going to come and sideline you when it feels like you should be processing it. And it's not always a convenient time or place for that. It's really not. I can remember a lot of times when I was going through the bulk of my grieving about my sons. I'd be sitting in my office, typing away, working on IT tickets like you do. And all of a sudden, boom, grief. And I'm crying and I don't even realize it. And I don't even know why. And my makeup's running and I'm a mess. And then I get a call on my phone and it's one of my user base and I have to go to their desk and pretend like I'm okay. But when I started taking time weekly, where just for this hour period, I'm in therapy. And for this hour-long period, I'm writing in a journal. And like I said, just once a week, it gave that grief a place and a time. because it'll always come when called. But it'll still come check in on you if it doesn't feel like it's being paid attention to enough. And I know it's weird to kind of personify an emotion like that, but really that's how it works. That's how grief happens. They talk about grief. There's an illustration that they have. That's a box and a big ball and a button. And the grief's on the button. And this big ball shifts around the box. And as time goes on, that ball shrinks and shrinks, so it hits the button less. But it still hits it every now and again. And finally, someday, you'll be down to a ball about that size. And then it'll hit that button even fewer times, but it'll still hit it. Grief is a constant companion. And she will always come when called. But if you don't call her, she's going to check on you. So call her every now and again. See what's up. The other thing that trauma teaches us is it teaches us you'll never be able to comprehend how much you can get through until you're through it. Or to put it in the words of Tony Banks of Genesis, the band Genesis, you got to get in to get out. And, let's just sing it. Got to get in to get out. That's from the song The Carpet Crawlers. It's from 78, I want to say, if you want to look that one up. After all, I am a DJ's younger sister. But that's the thing. And that's the thing that you need to understand. Is that you're never going to know what you can get through until you're in the moment. I have, on my Twitter, I have as my cover page, as like the top page thing, I haven't met all of me yet. And in January, when I started on my YouTube journey, when I started on all these crazy things that I started on, people would say you're doing too much. And I would say, I haven't met all of me yet. Let me determine if I'm doing too much. But there's a balance there. You shouldn't always completely disregard people that are telling you that you're doing too much. And at the same time, you shouldn't always completely regard them either. There's a middle path there. And you find it by gut checking yourself. Often. So now let's talk a little bit about the astrological omens kind of going on for the next couple days, for the next couple weeks, and talk about what that means big picture wise. Because there's some big shifts about to occur and are in the process of occurring. We're coming to a paradigm shift here. Pluto, in its dance, has returned to its home house for the first time since the founding fathers did the Constitution. And you can't tell me for a second. I mean, you may not believe in astrology, and that's okay. You can kind of just out on this. But one of the things that you notice sometimes is when these astrological omens start happening, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. These things start happening. And there's a paradigm shift coming. And you can see it in our young folks. You can see it in our older folks. You can see it everywhere. You can see people are protesting. People are starting to get more vocal about what they expect and need and want from things, from their governments, from their institutions. And that's not bad. That's great. That means people are paying attention. One of the things that I used to complain about all the time when I was a journalist, back in the day, back when I was in college, is that we would write editorials and no one would respond. It was just like, so I'm increasingly putting out spicier and hotter takes about how I feel, what my beliefs are, what I think. And y'all aren't even writing back? Like, you think that's okay, what I just said? Like, nobody's going to check me on this? And nobody did. It was pulling teeth to get anyone to write into the newspaper at all. But now, that's not a problem. Anytime anyone makes any sort of statement, there are 5 people there to call you out and say, maybe you need to reframe this, maybe you need to think about this again. And although that's really frustrating, think about it on a bigger scale. That's really cool. Everyone's getting a voice now. Everybody's talking. And that's fantastic. Yes, it's frustrating, but it's also fantastic. Because everyone gets a voice now. Everybody gets to talk. Everybody gets a time at the microphone. And that is amazing. That's incredible. So, this paradigm shift that's starting right now with Pluto entering its home house. The same thing that happened when the founding fathers were drafting the Constitution. If you've been waiting for real change, the next 20 years, you're likely going to see it. Things are going to be completely different 20 years from now. And that's a given. That's a given. But if you think about the time from 1980s to now and what the culture's done, there's been tiny shifts forward. There's been measured movements forward. And measured movements are fantastic. They're really great. But sometimes, and I think anybody that, is part of a religious organization or any sort of organization understands, sometimes there's a time to just drop a nuke on it from orbit and walk away. I know that sounds funny, but it's true. Sometimes you got to completely change the paradigm from the off, and you have to start from zero, and you got to ground that building. You got to ground that place. And sometimes that's required. I can't say whether or not that's required at this particular organization that I'm speaking for right now. And I'm not willing to go out on the limb and say that it is. But I can tell you that you're going to see it with many organizations around the world for the next several years. You're going to see just a grounding out and a complete restart. And in some cases, that's really required. Change is literally the blood of the universe. Think about it. What is eternal? And, a lot of people used to tell me a mother's love, the loves of the gods and the goddesses, used to tell me, death and taxes, all kinds of things. What is eternal? Well, here's the good news. Nothing is eternal. And yeah, I'm going to get an argument from that. Let me back that up. Let me back that up. All right. Gods and goddesses fade from minds, and their practices are lost to antiquity. A mother's love may very well be eternal, but if you can't tangibly feel it, it's changed. It's not what it was. They're still there, though, but you can't say it's the same thing. I mean, you can, and if you want to fight semantics with me, you can, but, don't. It's not the place for it. But yeah, everything changes. Even the things that we thought to be institutions as children have changed, and they will continue to change. Change is the blood of the universe. You can take heart, though. Anything that's lost is never lost forever. It's just no longer tangible. Everything changes. Everything. Life is a pattern, and pattern is life. This is one of these things that when I'm philosophizing to my friends, which I got a couple of friends that are like, yep, good old Sage D. She's going to sit there and tell you about your life. I don't do that as much as I once did, but I used to be kind of known for it. But this is something that I always hammered on. Life is pattern. Pattern is life. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And I always go back to the same point. When I was about, I want to say 6 or 7 years old, I was over at my best friend Christine Long's house. She isn't Christine Long anymore, and she's not on Facebook, but whatever. I used to come in, and she and I would go for a walk around her block. Now, her block was a really weird block, and it was a block like I lived on at some point in my life, whatever. But we'd go around the block, And we'd note the things that were going on around us. Because, just almost in like a quiet contemplative state. And like I said, we were young. And we'd look at the different plants and things, the different flowers that we'd see, because, it was the thing that caught your eye. And there was always a point, here's the birth of the flower. And you'd have this bud here. And like being kids, we'd dissect it and look at it and, gosh, what's all this gooey stuff, things like that. But you could see right there in that little pod where the flower would come from, where those things would come from. And and you kind of had like an estimation of what they would do. And then, a few months later, we'd go for a similar kind of nature walk. And we'd go and we'd look at the same things. Well, now this little pod isn't a little pod anymore. It's a flower. And, although in the pod it was a green flower, when it comes out, it's a purple flower, and it's really pretty. I'm like, wow. And, we grabbed a couple extra, put them in our hair, just back when I had hair. And we just, we'd play with them and we'd do these things with them. And same thing with like the little pine, not quite cones, but they developed the cones kind of in the spring and in the summer. And you'd start to see in the summer that these pine cones would start to dry a little bit and they'd elongate. And we'd watch the nature as it was going on around us. And then in the autumn, we went for yet another walk. Those flowers are long gone. They're seeds, though. And there are little pods worth of seeds that are on the ground where the flowers would have been. The pine cones were dried pine cones. And, they weren't open, but they were hanging on that tree and they were ready to go. And we'd watch these patterns. And then the next year, we started again. And that's when I realized that although everything was constantly changing, there was a pattern to it. It makes sense, sort of. And to somebody with a very analytical brain like me, that gave me all kinds of comfort. Like, these are institutions that will continue to happen. The seasons will continue to turn. They may not turn the way that you expect, but they will always turn. And there will always be a new thing. Life is pattern, and pattern is life. Pay attention to those patterns. They're important. There's a reason they exist. If you start to see the same pattern going on and on and on, the same way every single time in your life, you see a person coming into your life, you giving up your entire existence to help this person, and then this person ending up to be a completely not great person, and then having to walk away from that person. Pay attention to that. That's a pattern. That's telling you something. That's telling you something about you. Not about the people. It doesn't matter who else is involved. It tells you something about you. Why are you putting yourself in that position all the time? Girl or guy? You got to figure out what it is that you're getting from that. You got to find out what it is that's fulfilling you about that you keep on ending up in that role. Or what might be deficient or what might be lacking there to cause you to go there. And I'm not saying this as some person that knows everything. I'm saying this as your peer, as your friend. If you keep finding yourself in the same position, and you keep finding yourself in the same role, you gotta do some shadow work, girl and boy. Do it. Get in there and find out why you're doing it to yourself. Okay? Okay. I know you guys can do it. And another thing to remember and another thing to consider is at PPT, we do have people around who are always willing to talk to you about anything you're going through. We've got priestesses, we've got clergy members, we've got people who are willing to help. Don't be afraid to reach out. We're here. We love you. We want to make sure that every single person has what they need from us, whatever that may happen to be. Anyway, talking back about pattern a bit. You can predict life's ups and downs with accuracy when you start to pay attention to things that have already happened to you and the omens. For example, if I see a rainbow, I know I'm going to have a shit show of a quarter. I just know. I know this. But I know that the ending will lead to an amazing amount of personal growth, which is cool. I also know that if I'm looking at someone and time stops for just the briefest of moment when I'm looking at them, that person is going to be very important in my life story. And we all have something like this. You know, we talk about it when we're in love. Your heart palpitates and you feel like you got butterflies in your stomach, things like that. That's your physiological self telling you, hey, pay attention. There's something going on. Maybe not great. Maybe it's great. Who knows? But pay attention. So the other thing is, though, is that rainbows didn't always used to mean that to me. If I looked out and I saw a rainbow when I was a little girl, I just thought about my grandma. Because one time when we were driving around town, we were on Ford Road, hanging around Westland. It was raining and I was really scared. I was like 4 or maybe 5. Like I was this really little thing. And I was really scared. And Grandma was sitting in the back seat with me because Mom and Dad didn't want her driving for obvious reasons. My brother knows. But she turned to me and she says, Dee, if it's raining, you got to look for the rainbows. And I think that's a great metaphor for life. Because there are always rainbows. There's always something to look at. And there's always hope in a situation. There's always some hope, and you got to look for that silver lining sometimes. And I'm not saying look for the silver lining and avoid anything that's negative that's going on. I'm not saying that at all. There's a balance to it. You got to walk the line. Look that there's some positive, and look that there's some negative, and know that trends tend to get us to the center, where we're walking a line. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is change being a constant again, which has kind of been the overarching theme of the overarching theme, which is trauma. Change is so much of a constant in my life that I actually have a tattoo to remind me that I can get through any change that goes on. And I'll show you guys if I can without being indecent. There it is. This is the Boltzmann's equation. And what it does, and what that is the equation in science that talks about entropy in a closed space. It talks about specifically in thermodynamics, but I saw it as an analogy for everything. And it talks about how things tend toward chaos, and they tend toward change, and they tend toward unraveling, getting out of order. Entropy is kind of a weird and complex concept. And any parent knows that entropy is a real thing. We've all been that mom that walked out of the room for 2 seconds to go make ourselves a sandwich or something, and the kid has gotten into their diaper and they've spread poo all over the walls. That's entropy, my friends. That's what entropy means. This is here to remind me that in any conditions, I am only in control of my own actions. And that everything really is just complex mathematics, because mathematics is literally the language of the universe. And it sucks that I don't speak it, because no, I don't. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination. I had to ask my ex-husband after I'd gotten this tattoo done, because I knew what the tattoo symbolized, but I didn't know what the specific integers in the tattoo symbolized. And I had to explain to him, like, I don't know what these things are. And he just kind of laughed and chided me a little, like, you got a tattoo and you didn't fully understand what you're putting on your body. All right then, I see. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But basically, it talks about how these things happen within time. And that time's the constant. Which, yes, time's the constant, but time also has its own changes and things. This tattoo is also a symbol of my youngest, or my oldest son. Sorry about that, but this is a symbol of my oldest son because, as far as I'm concerned, he is entropy in a closed space. I love him dearly for it. But he is all air and space and activity and going and making things happen. And it also reminds me about the chaos that I myself have been through, and that I conquered it and I got the frig through it, which is really important sometimes. Sometimes if you're feeling low and you're feeling bad about yourself, look back for a second and say, that woman 20 years ago, that meek woman who was getting beaten to hell by her ex-husband, that meek woman stands here today with a voice, and she speaks, and she's not afraid to speak out, and she loves people, even though it's against her better judgment to love people sometimes because she's been so hurt. But that girl back there, she's kind of a wuss. But this woman here's a badass. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm really proud of me. And you should be proud of you for the things you've been through too. Please, just be proud of what you've been through. Be proud of what you survived. Because we've all survived something. We've all survived something. There's a difference between being a victim of trauma and surviving it. In being a victim, you don't seek out the help you need. You don't evaluate. You just say, why did this happen to me, without even trying to figure out the answer. When you take ownership of your trauma as a survivor, you find the help you need, usually through a counselor, and you start gathering resources. You ask, why did this happen to me? But then you start the difficult work of trying to find out why it happened to you. And trying to find out what the real why is. You start consulting with others to find out what trauma you may have been through as a child that maybe you don't remember. And then you find out maybe why you're attracted to these situations that you've been in. What in your past made you attracted to that in your future? Usually you identify that it's a low self-esteem thing. It's a previous abuses thing. And ways that maybe you were thinking that may have been flawed. And you slowly begin to reframe your experiences and rebuild those pieces of your personality that might have gotten beaten to shit. You attend meetings. You do the spell work required to help yourself maintain and achieve that personal growth. You write pages and pages in a journal, and you look them over. And then you slowly start to see the broken dishware that was your life become a mosaic before your eyes. We make mosaics. My dog makes noise. We make mosaics. If instead of taking ownership of your situation, you decide to mask it, you'll usually turn to some form of self-medication, whether it be nicotine, alcohol, cannabis. You'll turn to some form of self-medication to get yourself through it. Because there's trauma there that just wants to come out and talk to you about all the things that you're maybe not doing right. But you'll be in a holding pattern because self-medication is really helpful at the beginning to kind of like get yourself away from the thing that you're experiencing. But ultimately, in the long term, it's gonna not be as helpful. Because getting at that deep-seated problem is the thing you gotta do. And if you just self-medicate, you're not getting at that problem and you're never going to resolve the issue. And you're going to find yourself repeating patterns. Because life is pattern, and pattern is life. And if you don't address the thing that's causing the pattern, you'll be stuck in that pattern forever in a holding pattern. I know I said pattern like 12 times in that sentence, but for reals, you'll be stuck in a holding pattern. And that's no good for anybody, and that's really no good for you. That's bad for you. bad for you. And you should always try to do what's best for you. So you take some responsibility for what happened. And you start looking at the things and you start digging away at things. Because remember that hurt people hurt people. Anybody who's ever wronged me in my life, anybody who's ever wronged people around me in my life, have done so because they have been wronged too. They have been wronged too. Something happened to them 30 years ago that they may not even remember, that caused them to be this way, that caused their personality to develop in such a way. And that's really sad because they don't even see it sometimes. In fact, most of the time they don't even see it. They just start treating people like crap and just expect that it's going to be okay. But if you don't do the shadow work, if you don't figure out why you're doing that to yourself or to others, you're just going to keep hurting people and perpetually forever. You know? Also, if you've faced a lot of trauma in your life, you may develop what's called a trauma bond. And I'm not talking about you bond to somebody because of trauma. I mean, you bond to the concept of trauma. You think of it like a parent. And you don't feel right unless that parent is right there beside you, like a security blanket, but like a security blanket that's made of knives. And you hold it close to you and you say, I love you, trauma. And then people refer to you as a drama llama. You're not a drama llama. You just think that that's a parent. You think of that as, because of the kind of childhood you had, you think about that as your security blanket, and that if you're going through drama, you at least know what's going on. And when things are calm and normal, you feel really uncomfortable. Because mama ain't there for you. That trauma, that hurt, that pain, that constant stress and strain, they're not there for you at that time. So you go seeking it out. You go start making friends with people that are maybe unsavory. They're people that are not good influences on you. They're people that might be trying to cause harm to you unintentionally, because of course they're hurt too and they got their own inner child work to do that they're not doing. And you find these people and you make friends with them and they seem normal and they seem happy and this seems like just the kind of life you want to lead. But then you look and you realize that it's the trauma. It's the trauma that you're bonded to. And when you see somebody like that out in the world, when you're looking around, because we all know at least one or two people that we refer to as drama queens or drama llamas or whatever, you need to understand that's because they think of that as their mother. They think of that as their father. They think of that as a person who loves them and takes care of them. They think of that as security. So don't get so mad at them when they do it. They're going to do it until they address whatever's going on and until they're able to reframe it in such a way that they don't think of that as traumatic anymore, or they don't think of trauma as their mom anymore. Next, as a witch, you can see the harms you've caused while dealing with an addiction or while worshiping a person who didn't deserve your praise. In those times in your life you've injured, you have to determine how to repair those relationships. And then you have to begin to have uncomfortable conversations with those people about how to cure those and fix those relationships. And you start doing that, just that, when you're not a victim, when you take ownership and become a survivor. You start having those uncomfortable conversations. And that doesn't mean if you've been raped that you go out and you confront your rapist. That's dangerous. That means when somebody's maybe womanizing or sexualizing you in some way that you're not comfortable with, that you tell them, stop. I'm not a sexual object. I'm a human being with real emotions and real feelings, with a brain in my head and feet that like to walk. You know? there are a lot of ways what that looks like, where you say, enough is enough. I will not be treated this way. But it has to start with you. You have to be the one to make that stop. And that's the kind of uncomfortable conversations that we have. Or you determine maybe that it's best for your mental health to avoid people in situations that might cause a trigger for you. It might remind you of a trauma. And that's acceptable too. That's taking ownership too. That's okay. Don't let anyone sit there and tell you that because you're not willing to confront it, it isn't real. Or you're not brave, that you're cowardly. It is not a cowardly act to walk away when you know you need to walk away. It is not a cowardly act to walk away sometimes. Sometimes it's the bravest fucking thing you can do. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They're just trying to get at you because they've learned that they can get you to do things for them. And it's nice. And they like that. They're like, hey, I don't have to do this thing. It's great. Somebody else is doing it for me. And when you stop doing it and you start avoiding them, they're like, oh, you're avoiding me, so you're not brave anymore, huh? Look at you. Oh, you're so scared, so you go and talk and go cry to your therapist, huh? No, you're brave. Because you're looking at that thing, that monster inside of yourself that's being evil and doing awful things to you. And you're saying, no, fucker, I'm not taking it from you. And you're beating it out of the way. Just like earlier when we had to talk to our puppet. Yeah, same idea. Talk to your puppet. Tell it to go away. And it's brave. It's one of the bravest things you can do sometimes. Is to walk away from somebody who's causing you that kind of drama and trauma. And sometimes you really got to do that. You really have to. And these are the kind of insights where you can walk a labyrinth all damn day and never gain the knowledge that trauma provides you. And that's why trauma is a gift. That's why trauma is a gift. Because trauma does things to your brain and helps you reframe and readjust things within your head that maybe you weren't willing to before. That walking around that labyrinth or going in your mind palace, you weren't able to deal with before. Because they were hidden behind a door. Trauma opens those doors up and lets all those things out to play. And then you have to go and rearrange and reorganize them. But trauma is a gift. And we all have it in our lives. Whether it be a small thing or a large thing. Sometimes it's a minor trauma, and sometimes it's an event that alters our very view of the universe. It'd be nice to have a completely uneventful life, we say. We say, yeah, I just love it. I'm going to sit back on the beach. I'm going to drink me a Red Bull, and I'm going to watch as the tide comes in, right? We'd all love that. We all say. Unlimited income, a house in Maui, and we're watching the beach, and we're watching the waves come in, right? It may seem like a perfect life for your partner, for you, but wouldn't you get bored? I know I'd be insanely bored after about a day and a half of that, you know? And I'm being generous here. I'm a very active person naturally, so I don't think that would work for me for very long. I'd be really bored. So it's okay to have a little bit of trauma. It's okay to take a couple little risks with your emotions, with your feelings, with the people around you. It's okay to try to trust somebody because trauma's a gift. They hurt you. And I'm not saying go out and seek somebody out to hurt you, but open up a little. And if that person hurts you, you've learned something. And you've learned a lot of things about yourself. For every failed friendship, for every failed relationship, I have an encyclopedia worth of knowledge about me and who I am and how I adjust to things. Now, I know my friends like to joke with me a lot, and I see a couple of my friends are here. We like to joke around that Dee can bench press a Buick with her emotions. And we all talk about this just because this is who I am and what I am. And everybody's got their limits on what they can lift and what they can carry. If it's too heavy, put it down and find help. And there's lots of ways you can find help. If you need help, you can write us a PPT and you can get that kind of help. We can find those resources for you because we have those resources to share. If you can't afford it, there are plenty of places on YouTube where they talk about some of these more complex child or inner child workings, some of these kind of complex, like id and ego workings. You can find these things out in the world if you're looking. And you can find help. And we're more than happy to help you along if you want our help. So remember that. That's very important. Adversity is how we become aware of our wounds. We don't know what needs healing until we bend it the right way sometimes. Like, I forget that my elbow's a little squeaky until I go to lay down at night and I have to lay like this and it's like, oh, that's a little squeaky. That hurts. Yeah. Sometimes life is suffering. Sometimes, like really, really suffering so that you can heal those sore spots. And sometimes it's not. You know, sometimes it's just clear sailing for a little while. And like for somebody like me, and I fight this every single day so that you guys can understand how not perfect I am. I fight this a lot where everything's clear sailing. The bills are caught up. You know, my husband's cool and everything's going well with that. We grooving. I've got a good friend group. I've got people that I can trust around me. You know, I've got all those people around me and everything's safe and fine. And like, I'm sitting here going, all right, when's the other shoe going to drop? Things are perfect and idyllic right now. That's a problem. When's that shoe going to drop? Stop asking about the shoe. Stop it. I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to you about that. Stop asking about that damn shoe. Because if you ask about that shoe, we create what we speak. There it goes. Stop asking about the shoe. That shoe is only going to drop if you say it's going to drop. And it might just drop anyway, sure. But don't ask for it to come down and see you. It's like I said. Grief will always come when called. But it'll still come check up on you. But it'll always come when called. So don't call that into your existence. If you don't want the shoe to drop right now, don't start asking about the shoe dropping. I mean, obviously, be aware that it could. But don't ask for it. Don't say, everything's wrong or everything's right in the world. When's it going to suck? And I have a lot of friends myself. I do this too, where I have to actually condition and reframe every single time that I start thinking that way. I know that you have examples from your life as well that explain that and talk about that. Life is just complex mathematics. Because science has nearly proven that destiny can be mathematically quantified. They just haven't quite figured out how yet. In a recent study, they proved this through time travel simulation. They used a quantum computer and basically they sent what they call a qubit back in time. And then operator on the other end of back in time altered the qubit a little bit. And then you sent it back forward in time. Again, it's all quantum and it's all theory. But they sent it forward in time. While it was coming forward in time, that altercation or the altering that the guy in the past did started to get fixed as it came forward to the other researcher, the first researcher. And it wasn't completely right when it got back to her, but it was right enough to be identified as the correct data. So, destiny is almost scientifically proven. But, there are caveats to that, obviously. And you may be asking what to do with all of this spiritually. And I know it sounds like psychology because a lot of it is. When we enter into the will worker space, we must understand that we do so with our minds, our bodies, and our souls. This means any baggage that our minds carry will follow us into those sacred spaces. And you don't want to be the guy that brings that into his spiritual or sacred space. Or the gal, or the they that bring it into that spiritual space. And I think that's all I have for you this week. So let's go ahead and end, as we always do, with the Goddess Prayer. May the Goddess shine within and through you. May her healing spirit fill your heart. May her wisdom guide you. May her love embrace you. And may her peace bless you all the days of your life. So mote it be.